So you just started your food truck. You've probably gone through a whole bunch of different hoops as far as the local government goes about getting your license and all those applications, and then you're going to actually face an inspector. So today we're going to talk about some tips to help ensure you pass that very first health inspection. Welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I am a food truck business coach, author of 5 food truck vending books, including Food Truck 101 and Food Truck 201. This podcast is all about helping you start and grow your food truck business.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
The very first thing that you got to understand about the initial health inspection is most states don't want any food on your food truck or food trailer. All they want to do is make sure that the layout matches whatever information you sent them when you applied, as well as making sure that the equipment that you have on the food truck actually functions the way it's supposed to function. And then they look for a couple other basics. So we're going to go through what they're going to be looking for so you can kind of put your mind at ease, because it's not anything to be nervous about. The first recommendation I have is that you understand your own regulations in your area, because that's going to give you the details you need to make sure that you pass. If you're lucky enough to live in a state or a location that has a published sample inspection available on the internet, download that sample inspection. Now understand, like I said just a second ago, the initial inspection won't involve food. So a lot of the things on your inspection form that talks about food temperatures isn't going to apply. So you'll see that 20 or 30 item list on the inspection shrink down to just a handful of things. So the initial inspection, again, is pretty easy, but you got to know the regulations and know the details of what they're looking for. Now this should go without saying, but you want to make sure that when you pull up for that inspection or the inspector arrives at your place of business to do that initial inspection, the place is neat and clean and organized. You don't want to have a coffee cup or a can of soda sitting around because you've gotten so bored and nervous waiting on the inspector to show up that you've been sitting there sipping your drink and you set it down on the counter that's supposed to be preparing food. So have the place looking as if you just bought the trailer. Sparkling, organized, neat and clean. The inspector is going to be looking for certain things. They are going to check your water pressure, most likely. They are going to also check your water temperature. Combining those two things lets the inspector know how quickly you will run out of water. And there are some states that actually have a size requirement on your freshwater tank, your hot water tank abilities, and then the size of the sinks to match all of those amounts of water. So you got to know the details. What does your state look for? You don't want to be shocked when the health inspector says, oh, that tank is way too small for the sinks that you have. You want to know that when you're in the build process. The inspection process means it's going to cost you a whole bunch of money to fix that issue, because you will not be able to talk your way out of that and get a license. So again, understand your regulations, and let's talk about the specifics on the hot water. Your state most likely is going to have either a 100-degree threshold. It may have a 110-degree threshold. It's going to be one of those two numbers. What that means is that when the health inspector turns on the hot water, the hand wash part of it should reach at least 100 degrees. And of course, you can mix cold water in with that to bring it down if it's above the 110 threshold, because it could be too hot for some people. So to wash your hands, it has to be between 100 and 110. The health inspector may ask you to demonstrate how you wash your hands to make sure you understand the hand washing process, and then in turn would be able to train any employees that you have in the future. So make sure you understand the basics on hand washing. How far up your arm you should wash, what you should do with your nails, how long it should take, what do you do with the paper towel when you're done with it, how do you get the paper towel to begin with. So you got to make sure your hand wash sink is totally set up. Even though you don't need food on the trailer, you will need to have soap as far as your hand wash sink goes, and you will need to have paper towels stocked and ready to go. Then the inspector most likely is going to move over to your triple sink and either ask you to fill them up and demonstrate, or they'll ask you just to verbally tell them, how do you handle the triple sink? What goes in each one? How much water? How much of the chemical, whether it's soap or sanitizer, goes in each of the sinks? They're going to want you to show them your sanitized strips that test the water to make sure that there's the correct strength of sanitizer in there. Because the health inspector has 3 criteria that he's going to be looking at for everything that happens on your food truck. He's either going to ask you to demonstrate it so he can see it. He's either going to observe you, again, so he can see it, or he's going to ask you questions about that particular procedure. And then he wants you to be able to explain it. And then the other criteria, the third thing that he could look for would be your food certification. If you have your food manager certification, then they may not ask you any questions at all. But the key is that you're prepared. You have the food manager certification, whether your state requires it or not. You're able to answer any questions about procedures that would happen within your food truck or food trailer as far as the food you're going to be carrying, and then the basics. So after the health inspector is done with your triple sinks and he's satisfied that they work properly, he's satisfied with your hand wash, he's going to move on to your equipment. Anything that's hot won't need to be turned on. They'll save that for the next inspection when you're actually serving food. But anything that's supposed to be cold, they're going to put a thermometer in. They're going to make sure that the refrigeration gets to the temperature it's supposed to get to. And then they're also going to make sure that you have a way to monitor that. Some states will accept the digital displays, but I can tell you from my experience, those digital displays end up not working pretty quickly, or they end up being very inaccurate. So health departments like to see actual thermometers hanging inside of refrigerators and reach-ins. You can buy a little cheap thermometer that just hangs off the edge of a shelf and just put it right at the front near where the door opens. So that way you know it's at the warmest part of your refrigerator. And if that warmest part is below the 40 or 41 degree threshold that your health department has, then you know the colder part is definitely well below. But they will look for those particular things. A couple of other things that you want to keep in mind is the health inspector may look for where you're going to be storing your food. If they're looking through your menu, they may ask you, where will you be storing this particular meat? And you need to tell them where it's going to be stored within the refrigeration, and you may have to tell them where it has to go once it's cooked or prepped. The health inspector may ask you about your employees. How many employees are you going to have? How are you going to train them? They may want to see some type of records on how they're being trained. Typically, the state will either require a formal food handler permit that the health department or some other school agency does, or they're going to allow you to be your own trainer because you're a certified food manager and you're responsible for what the employees do. But in either case, you have to have records that show that these employees have been trained when they receive the training and when that training would be expiring. If you have any staff that's with you, the health inspector may ask them questions too to see what they've been taught. I have seen health inspectors ask employees about how to set up the triple sink. I've seen that one a lot because that's the easiest thing, and they expect all employees to know how to do that because it's a very basic procedure. I also recommend that you conduct your own little mini inspection. Get that form downloaded from your health department's website and then see the things that they're going to be looking at and how you stack up. It'll help expose an area that you may or may not be prepared to handle that inspection. When it becomes inspection time, some states require you to have the fire department sign off before they'll let the health department even look at it. In some states, they do it simultaneously. But in any case, you want to make sure that you have your fire prevention apparatus there, whether it's a fire extinguisher, your hood suppression system. You want to make sure it's all inspected, it's all dated, it's all appropriately documented for your health department. You want to show where the fire extinguishers hang, the different fire extinguishers that you're required. Health department could be looking for that as well. If there's a violation, and it is possible on the initial inspection, there's a violation. If you're able to fix the violation in real time, fix it. It could be something as simple as you forgot to fill up the soap dispenser, and then you just go grab the soap and fill it up. Health inspector will still mark off because the soap dispenser was not full, but they'll also note that it was corrected at that point. And while it doesn't help improve your score, it does show anyone that's reading that initial inspection, especially if it's a guest thinking about, should I try this new food truck or not? And they see that you just made a minor mistake but corrected it on site, they'll be happy. The guest will be happy and come try your food out. But if you're not able to correct it, then that guest might be wondering, well, what else is he going to forget? One thing that a lot of people don't realize, that there are states out there that the health inspector, before they ever set foot on your truck, will pull up your last inspection, and they'll know what you missed on the last inspection, and they will look for those things again. So if you've missed that soap on the initial inspection, you can be guaranteed the health inspector is going to make a beeline for that soap dispenser to make sure it's filled up. The states that require the health inspectors to review the previous inspections also most likely are going to take off more points because it's a repeat violation, and they track repeat violations. And if you repeat them too frequently, they could put you on some type of administrative hearing or even ask you to close until you correct the situation. So that's why it's super important that when something happens, if you're able to correct it in real time, correct it in real time. You got to remember that passing that initial inspection is super critical because you can't open for business until you passed. But if you just pay attention to the details, again, hot water is hot, refrigerated equipment's cold, you're most likely going to be able to pass. And then, of course, setting up that hand sink with its essential components. If you're able to just do those few things, you're going to pass. And then just keep in mind as you get open, and there's going to be those random inspections where they don't call you and say, hey, I'm coming out. They just show up. Just make sure you're doing everything right every day. Not for the health inspector. You're doing it right for yourself, your business, and your guests. Thank you so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you're finding all the information helpful to your food truck business, please become a monthly supporter of the podcast. Just hit the support button or follow the link in the description. Every little bit does help keep us going. Join our Facebook group. It's called Food Truck Training. We have a whole bunch of awesome members at all different levels, from brand new beginners to decades-old veterans. They've all got your back when it comes to helping you with your food truck. And again, thank you for listening. Come back tomorrow because you know I got plenty more to say when it comes to helping you and your food truck business grow.